Hey guys, what's up? Today I got another, I guess, mild rant video for y'all. But yeah, as you go through linguistics in college and maybe make a YouTube channel about it, you'll find some conventions that linguists use to discuss relevant topics, and some of them are complete head scratchers. Either they make no sense, or they only seem to apply to English, or maybe they just straight up inhibit your ability to grasp the concept. Today, I'm gonna share some of my least favorite conventions in linguistics. If you're a student in the field, you may want to use this video as a warning of things to look out for, but if not, just keep watching for the entertainment value. Let's go! So our first convention to diss for the day is standard IPA. Now, I've already talked ad nauseum about IPA on this channel. I've made a whole video about it, in fact, and some of my grievances were exposed there. But don't get me wrong, I love IPA, and I truly appreciate how much easier it makes linguistics. All my complaints are about how it gets used. As discussed, English is a good starting point. Back in the IPA video, I mentioned a couple ways that I highly disagree with the standard symbols used to transcribe American English, and yes, some people had disagreements. You can find out all about that in that video, but the main source of contention is standard transcriptions for vowels, which are based off a standard that's either idealized or obsolete. Particularly for American English, one thing I feel like happened is that the IPA was standardized by British people who have a slightly misguided perception on what American English actually sounds like, and also it was done decades ago and needs an update. And I was actually recommended a video by Dr. Jeff Lindsay in that comment section, maybe not for the right reason, but the video is good nonetheless, and it let me know that British English has the exact same problem, which is relieving to hear. As for other languages, there are two in particular that I want to call out because I have stories about them, both of which happened in the Germanic sound shifts video. First is Icelandic, which has a standard for IPA transcriptions that is apparently out of date by about 100 years. And when I was learning Icelandic, I noticed that the pronunciations I was hearing didn't match their IPA transcriptions, but I couldn't do much about it because I feel like it'd be super arrogant of me to try deviating from the IPA standards in a language I don't know super well. But when I made the Germanic sound shifts video, an Icelander left a comment saying that my transcriptions were off, that the standard was expired, and gave me some advice on better transcriptions. And unfortunately, y'all are just gonna have to trust me on that one because I couldn't find the comment while I was making this video. It may have been deleted. But don't get me wrong, I was thrilled to receive that comment because now I feel released from the old IPA, and in more recent videos where I've had to write Icelandic IPA, I was able to do it more accurately using the information from that comment, which matches what I hear. So as for the other example from the Germanic sound shifts video, this one's more embarrassing. At the beginning, I mentioned how I hadn't actually studied standard German at that point, but I had enough exposure to pronounce German words well. Yeah, famous last words, because many German speakers commented that later on, I pronounced the plural of Maus, Mäuse, way too close to a certain part of the female body. Now, wanna guess what caused that mistake? That's right, faulty IPA. In this case, I got the IPA from Wiktionary, which transcribed the diphthong in question as O, followed by U, which is the rounded version of I. So I read that straight off the page, which resulted in Oi, when the actual pronunciation of that word is Oi. The IPA was completely wrong, and now I know that because I actually did study German in 2024. Interestingly, English transcribers also sometimes do the inaccurate posh thing of putting a lax vowel at the end of a diphthong where a tense vowel actually goes, like in I, which sometimes gets transcribed I. I think it's a bit pretentious to do that, and as with this whole section, IPA standards need to either update themselves or just go away. Now, still staying somewhat related to IPA, this complaint has to do with two disciplines not communicating with each other and making linguists' lives harder. Basically, an IPA, a ring under a symbol, makes it voiceless, like in the Icelandic word hlaupa. There was a section about that in the IPA video. So when you're reading a PIE transcription, you'd expect that ring to also make symbols voiceless, right? Nope. For PIE transcriptions, the ring underneath indicates a syllabic consonant, like in wilkos. But if you learned IPA first, then you're probably inclined to make the L voiceless, like wilkos. Cause it's already obvious that the L is syllabic, it's between two consonants. And I mean, I understand the need for it in PIE because it's not always this obvious that a consonant is syllabic, but did they have to make it the ring? They got us thinking PIE sounded like parcel tongue. That's not a very good gastronomic combo. Alright, now we got a bit of Anglocentrism for my next issue. Sometimes in official linguistic context, interrogatives, those being words that indicate questions, are referred to as WH words. Yes, even when talking about languages at large or even one language that's not English. Now, I understand the appeal for certain contexts, like teaching Anglophone kids how to spell, until the pattern falls apart at how, and now that you've seen that tidbit, you can probably guess who's responsible for popularizing it in linguistics. Also, side note here, justice for which and how much, they get excluded from the other 6 interrogative terms way too often, and they deserve the same recognition. Actually though, you're probably much less likely to see the term WH word specifically because interrogative is more popular there, but it's very commonly used in other terms like WH movement or WH in situ. It just gives a vibe of English is everything and the rest of y'all are inferior, and it's not helpful at all. Next up, I've talked about this in a couple videos already, but I've started to really resent when the term past participle is used for deverbal adjectives representing the passive voice. It's used so commonly that we barely think about it. And it makes sense because at least in Western European languages, you hear that participle and it's like, okay, so the verb happened to them, past tense. But all my comfort with calling those past participles left when I studied Telugu. You see, Telugu has an alteration you can attach to a verb to make it passive voice. It's the suffix baru. But there's also a different verb form that indicates an action that happened in the past, particularly when used as an adjective on a noun, and it's called the past participle, having absolutely nothing to do with the passive voice. Seeing Telugu use the term properly for the tense rather than the aspect made me realize that using the term past participle for brevity when talking about the passive voice is an injustice to both the past tense and the passive voice. So I made that change for good when I made the Telugu language overview. After that is something I've also talked about before with the Germanic grammatical shifts, that being, the terms strong and weak do not belong in linguistics. I have three main reasons for this, starting with the fact that they tell me nothing about either the function of the grammatical category or its appearance. Optimally, a grammatical category's name tells me what it does, even if in some overly pedantic Latin form like the nominative case or the conditional mood. If not, a term like the short form of Russian adjectives will suffice because I can identify it as, the short form. The terms strong and weak give me nothing, not to mention my second complaint about them. They're completely overused. In Germanic linguistics, for example, the terms have two uses with nothing to do with each other. In adjectives, strong ones go before indefinite nouns and in predicative position, while weak adjectives go before definite nouns. But in verbs, they're completely different. Strong verbs change their internal vowel for the past tense forms known as ablaut, I have a video about it, and weak verbs just add a suffix. And this in particular is completely counterintuitive to me. Wouldn't you want to say that strong verbs resist change their vowels while weak verbs succumb to it? I actually had it backwards for years because of this. And this brings up my third gripe. The words strong and weak have value judgments associated with them, and this leaves an open door for pseudo-linguists to claim that certain features are inherently better than others, leading to language policing and prescriptivism like we've unfortunately seen a lot of. I definitely don't want those people getting access to linguistic literature about anything being strong or weak, so linguists really gotta stop being lazy with the terms and come up with something that works. So now I've reached my last complaint about linguistic conventions, and I have a bit of a lesson in making good dictionaries to start. When you're deciding which form of verbs to show in a list of them, you're going to want something that gives you all the information you need to form any other verb conjugation off of it outside of exceptions. To give some examples of languages that do this correctly, Hungarian uses the third-person singular present tense conjugation for indefinite objects, which is the only form that may or may not have an ik suffix. Cherokee also uses the third-person singular progressive present tense because on it, you can see both the variants of the personal prefix and the tense suffix that need to be used. Meanwhile, Hebrew and Arabic both use the third-person masculine singular past tense form because you can determine any other verb conjugation off of that form, although Arabic does need to add the gemination mark to differentiate class 2 from class 1. So then tell me, why does classical Latin use the first-person singular active present tense form as the model for its verbs when that form looks identical across most verb classes? Almost all of them end in long o. That tells me nothing about what the rest of the conjugations look like. The logical solution is to do the same thing its descendants do, simply using the infinitive form to indicate the thematic vowel for any other conjugation or derivation, again, notwithstanding irregulars, which there's no good solution for. But yeah, this is just needless cruelty to learners of a language that doesn't even have native speakers of that variety anymore. So that's it, I guess it's time to review my various beefs with so-called standard linguistics. First, IPA is best when it's not an idealized 100-year-old form of a language's pronunciation. Similarly, it would be very helpful if PIE transcriptions didn't use the ring in a completely different way than IPA does. Then, we need to acknowledge that referring to interrogative pronouns as WH words only makes sense in 75% of English and 0% of everything else, so it's a bad linguistics term. After that, it would really help if the term past participle only lined up with the past tense and not the passive voice. And for the last two super important points, we need to abolish strong and weak as linguistics terms and make sure that the conjugation we're using to represent verbs in a dictionary actually gives us useful information. Y'all got any other beef with conventions in linguistics, or maybe another field you're more into like psychology or chemistry? Leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching, I'll see y'all next time.